My name is Clara Hensley, and I'm 29 years old. I'll never forget the birthday that changed everything. It began like any other Saturday morning gray light slipping through the blinds, the faint hum of traffic outside, and the quiet rhythm of my family's house that I'd grown too used to. I'd been living there my whole life, saving money, helping my parents with bills, and keeping the house in order while my younger sister Jenna drifted in and out like a guest who never cleaned up after herself. That morning, I got up early. I made coffee for everyone, buttered toast, and even sliced fruit the way Mom liked it just in case anyone remembered what day it was. I tried to convince myself they would. I kept glancing at the hallway, waiting to hear a "Happy birthday," or maybe see a card on the table. But all I heard was the sound of the faucet dripping and my father flipping through the newspaper. Mom walked in, hair still in rollers, phone already in her hand. She didn't look up. "Did you pay the water bill?" she asked flatly. I nodded, pretending it didn't sting. Jenna came in last, barely awake, rummaging through the fridge. "I'm meeting Tara at 10, she said, ignoring me completely. No one said a word about my birthday. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me, and told myself maybe they were planning something later, maybe a dinner, or at least a cake. That hope was the only thing that kept me from breaking right there. I smiled when Jenna asked if I could do her laundry since she'd be out all day. I said yes, because I always said yes. By noon, the house was silent again. My parents had gone grocery shopping. Jenna had left with her friends. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the half-decorated Christmas tree we still hadn't taken down, even though it was January. It looked forgotten like me. I decided to take a walk, hoping the air would clear my head. But everywhere I went, there were reminders. Families in cafes laughing together, people carrying gift bags, couples taking photos. Every smile I saw made the ache in my chest grow heavier. I checked my phone. Nothing. No messages, no calls. By evening, I'd given up pretending. I ordered takeout for one and sat on the couch with the TV on mute. The silence of the house pressed against me like a weight. I tried to tell myself it was just another day, but the tears wouldn't listen. They came slowly at first, then all at once, years of quiet disappointment spilling out. I thought about all the birthdays I'd planned for them. The surprise dinners, the cakes I'd baked, the cards I'd hand-drawn when money was tight. I remembered staying up late wrapping gifts for Jenna when she was little, just to see her smile in the morning. I'd done so much, given so much, and never asked for anything in return except a bit of love. But sitting there alone, it hit me how one-sided it all was. I picked up my phone, desperate for something. Anything. That's when I noticed the family group chat. I hadn't checked it all day. Maybe they were planning something secretly. Maybe I was wrong. My heart jumped as I opened it, only for it to crash seconds later. The latest messages weren't about me. They were about me. Jenna had written earlier that morning, "Don't forget it's Clara's birthday today, lol." My mother replied with a laughing emoji. "Oh please, she'll survive. She's too emotional about things." My father had added, "Save your money, she doesn't even go anywhere." I stared at the screen, reading those lines again and again until they blurred. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was cruelty disguised as humor. They hadn't just ignored my birthday, they had mocked it. Something inside me went quiet. Completely quiet. The kind of silence that isn't empty, it's focused. I put my phone down and walked to my room, every step heavy but steady. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank computer screen. The ache in my chest slowly hardened into something else. They had given me nothing for my birthday. No kindness, no warmth, not even basic respect. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my pride to keep the peace. All the times I'd told myself family meant forgiveness. But that night, sitting in the faint blue glow of my laptop, I decided something would change. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing. I would never let them make me feel small again. I would stop giving. I would stop fixing. I would stop making excuses for people who didn't care whether I smiled or cried. For years, I'd believed love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. But now, for the first time in my life, I began to wonder what love would look like if I turned it inward. The house was quiet, except for the ticking clock. Midnight passed. My birthday ended without a single word from them. I closed my laptop, stared into the dark, and whispered to myself, "They gave me nothing." Then, with a calm I didn't understand yet, I added, "Maybe it's time I give them exactly that." I wish I could tell you they simply forgot. That maybe life got busy, or everyone had too much on their minds. But the truth? They didn't forget me. They chose to. That morning after my birthday, I woke up to a numb kind of silence, the kind that follows after disappointment drains you completely. The dishes from last night were still in the sink, the takeout box still half open on the counter. I didn't bother cleaning. For once, I didn't feel like fixing anything. I made coffee and sat at the table, staring at the phone screen still showing those cruel messages. I read them over and over, trying to find some trace of misunderstanding. But there was none. It was all there, Jenna's mockery, Mom's dismissive laughter, Dad's careless words. I kept scrolling further up the chat, and that's when I saw the part that broke me. A week before my birthday, Jenna had asked if they should pretend to do something for me so I wouldn't throw a pity party. Mom replied, "Nah, let her learn. She always plays the victim anyway." My father had sent a thumbs up emoji. That was when I realized it wasn't forgetfulness, it was contempt. They'd planned to do nothing. I put the phone down and stared at the steam rising from my mug. All those years, I had believed they loved me in their own way. That maybe I just wasn't the easiest person to love. But seeing those words proved otherwise. They didn't love me, they loved what I did for them. They loved the convenience of me. As I sat there, memories started surfacing like ghosts. Mom handing me bills and saying, "You're better at this stuff, honey." Dad asking me to stay late at the family business, just for a bit, which always turned into unpaid overtime. Jenna expecting me to pick her up after parties, or cover her phone bill, or help her with her classes. I had built my entire life around being useful to them, and they had built theirs around using me. That realization made something in me shift. It wasn't anger yet, just a sharp clarity, like glass cutting through fog. I grabbed my old photo album from the shelf. Birthday after birthday, pictures of me smiling beside cakes, candles glowing, my family surrounding me. At least that's how it looked. But as I studied the photos, I noticed how no one else was looking at me. They were looking at the camera, their faces bored, distracted. I was the only one smiling like it meant something. I closed the album and pushed it away. That girl, the one who kept believing they cared, didn't exist anymore. The house started to feel smaller, suffocating. Every object reminded me of my place there. The laundry basket full of Jenna's clothes, the stack of unpaid bills with my handwriting on them, the grocery list pinned to the fridge. My whole life had been service. I was done serving. I walked to my room and sat at my desk. My laptop was still open from last night, the blue light washing over me. For a long moment, I just stared at the blank document on the screen. Then I started typing not a letter, not an email, but a list. A list of everything I'd done for them. Paid utilities for 6 years straight. Managed Dad's bookkeeping at his company. Handled Mom's credit card payments. Helped Jenna with her rent when she moved out temporarily. Covered groceries, gas, emergencies. The total was staggering. Tens of thousands of dollars, countless hours of unpaid work, endless emotional labor. I'd been their safety net, their accountant, their housekeeper, their everything. And all it earned me was ridicule. I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tight. They had taken advantage of me for so long that it felt normal, but it wasn't normal. It was exploitation, wrapped in the word family. That word suddenly felt hollow. I opened the drawer where I kept my personal documents, birth certificate, tax forms, bank details, and began organizing them into a folder. If I was going to free myself, I needed to do it properly. I logged into my bank account, checked the joint bills, and began planning how to detach myself from every connection that tied me to that house. The more I worked, the lighter I felt. Each click, each file saved, was another thread cut. But before I could take the next step, I stopped. Because deep down, a voice whispered, "Are you really ready to walk away?" I hesitated, looking around my small room, the same one I'd lived in since childhood. The faded posters on the wall, the bookshelf filled with old notebooks, the window that overlooked the backyard where Dad used to teach me how to ride a bike. It was filled with memories, but none that brought me peace anymore. I realized something then. I wasn't walking away from home. I was walking away from a prison I'd mistaken for one. My phone buzzed suddenly. It was Jenna. For a split second, hope flickered. Maybe she was reaching out. Maybe she felt guilty. But when I opened the message, it was just a meme about people who take birthdays too seriously. a laughing emoji at the end. That was the final push. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. The anger I'd held back began to rise not as a shout, but as a steady, burning certainty. I was done. Done waiting for them to change. Done seeking scraps of affection. Done being the invisible daughter who held everything together. They gave me nothing. So I would give them exactly that. No attention. No effort. No more pieces of myself to feed their comfort. I didn't know what my plan was yet, but I knew it had begun. That night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open again. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. My reflection in the screen looked back at me, eyes tired but clear. I started typing something slowly, deliberately. I didn't even know what I was writing at first, just thoughts spilling out, how I'd been used, how I'd been dismissed, how I was finally ready to stop. When I finished, I saved the document under a single word: rebirth. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. The moonlight fell across my hands, pale and cold, but I felt alive for the first time in years. Tomorrow I would start setting things in motion, and this time, they wouldn't see it coming. Revenge doesn't come from hate. It comes from exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones after years of being dismissed, ignored, and taken for granted. That's what I felt the next morning. Not rage, not sorrow, just a cold, clear purpose. The first thing I did was make coffee, not because I wanted it, but because routine gave me a sense of control. As the kettle hissed, I opened my laptop and began digging through digital files, bills, bank accounts, company spreadsheets. My father's small business was practically built on my labor. I'd handled every invoice, every tax document, every client email for years, all unpaid. He called it helping family. I called it what it was now: exploitation. I clicked through the financial folders, my stomach tightening with each discovery. My father had been funneling money from the company's main account into his personal one for months. He'd labeled those transfers as miscellaneous expenses, but they weren't expenses, they were gambling payments, hidden behind coded descriptions, betting transactions, and online game platforms. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled. He wasn't just careless, he was reckless. And worse, he'd used my name on several files. I had signed tax documents for him without realizing what I was signing for. Next, I opened my mother's credit card account. She'd always told me she struggled to make ends meet, that she needed help with payments. But the truth sat right in front of me. Designer clothes, online boutiques, and monthly spa memberships all charged to the same card. The woman who said she couldn't afford a birthday cake for me had no trouble dropping hundreds on handbags. I sat back in my chair, breathing deeply. I wasn't shocked anymore. I was done being shocked. I was simply taking inventory of the lies I'd been fed. I made a new spreadsheet, one that didn't belong to them. At the top, I titled it, Exit Plan. The first column was simple: what I'm taking. The second, what I'm leaving behind. I began listing everything. My savings account mine. My car registered under my name, though Dad always claimed it was his gift to me. My clothes, my documents, my laptop all going with me. Under what I'm leaving behind, I wrote every burden they ever handed me. Then I started the real work. I opened my bank app and separated my savings from our shared household account. Every automatic payment linked to my name was canceled: utilities, groceries, mortgage. I was done being their invisible provider. By mid-afternoon, I'd already drafted my resignation letter. It was short and emotionless. Effective immediately, I resigned from Hensley & Co. I will no longer be responsible for financial management or client communication. All relevant documents are organized in the shared folder. Sincerely, Clara Hensley. I scheduled the email to send at 7 a.m. the next morning. I wanted them to wake up to it, to feel the shock of my absence like I'd felt theirs on my birthday. Then, I packed. Not much, just essentials. A suitcase, a duffel bag, my documents. I didn't even glance at the old photos on my nightstand. Those memories had lost their warmth. I folded my favorite clothes carefully, placed my laptop charger on top, and zipped the bag shut. Before leaving my room, I looked around one last time. Every corner held traces of me: years of loyalty, silence, endurance. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of everything I'd given up. I walked quietly down the hallway, past the framed family photos on the wall, smiling faces, fake harmony. My parents in the center, Jenna's arm looped around me, both of us pretending we were happy. I touched the glass of one frame, then turned away. In the kitchen, I left my house key on the counter. Just a small, cold piece of metal, but to me, it symbolized release. That evening, I drove to a nearby town where I'd rented a small one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't fancy peeling paint, creaky floors, but it was mine. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different. Free. I placed my bags down, sat on the floor, and just breathed. No one was shouting my name, asking for favors, or judging me. It was quiet, and for once, silence didn't hurt. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I made coffee and waited. When the clock hit 7, I refreshed my email just to be sure. My resignation had sent. At 7:15, my phone began vibrating violently. Dad. Then Mom. Then Jenna. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat there, sipping my coffee, watching the light spill through the window. Voicemail after voicemail came in angry voices, desperate questions. Clara, what is this? You can't just quit like that. Do you have any idea what you've done? I knew exactly what I'd done. I'd taken back control. Hours later, I got an email from a longtime client. The subject line read, "Clara need to discuss." I hesitated before opening it. The message was simple. I heard about the situation at Hensley & Co. If you're available, I'd love to continue working with you directly. A tiny smile crept across my face. Even outside their shadow, people still trusted me. That evening, I sat on the floor again, laptop open, reviewing what I'd accomplished in 24 hours. Every tie that once bound me to that toxic house was unraveling, thread by thread. Still, I knew this wasn't over. My parents wouldn't let go easily. People like them never do. They thrive on control. But I wasn't the same person they controlled anymore. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence: "Freedom is louder in silence." Just as I set the pen down, my phone lit up with one last notification: an incoming call from Dad. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then another call came through, this time from an unknown number. I hesitated but ignored it too. Finally, I turned the phone face down. Tomorrow would be chaos for them. They'd wake up to missing passwords, locked accounts, and a business they couldn't run without me. And I'd be miles away, breathing for the first time. I lay back on the mattress and closed my eyes, a small smile forming. Everything had begun. They gave me nothing for my birthday, so I gave them exactly what they deserved: nothing at all. By 8 a.m., I was the villain in every story my parents were telling. My phone was a battlefield: missed calls, furious texts, and half a dozen voicemails that blurred together into one long rant. Dad's voice cracked through the first message. "Clara, what is this? You can't just walk out. Do you have any idea how much work you've left behind?" The next one was colder. "You're making a fool of me, young lady. Everyone's asking questions. Fix this now before you ruin us." Mom's message followed soon after, drenched in guilt. "Sweetheart, we were just teasing about your birthday. Don't be so sensitive. Come home. Let's talk this out." Then Jenna's voice, sharp and mocking. "Wow, dramatic much? You quit your job and ghosted us? Grow up, Clara." I didn't answer any of them. I let the words pile up and die in the silence of my small apartment. I wasn't angry anymore, just detached. It was strange how peaceful the world felt when you stopped trying to please people who thrived on your obedience. I spent the morning setting up my new routine: coffee, laptop, quiet. My body felt lighter, as if shedding their expectations had physically removed weight from me. But the peace didn't last long. By noon, my inbox was exploding with messages from clients. Some were confused, others curious. My father had clearly told them I'd abandoned the company. I could imagine him pacing in his office, red-faced, yelling into the phone, trying to maintain control as everything slipped away. A message stood out, one from an old client named Mr. Adler. "Clara, I just heard the news. Your resignation caught me off guard. But between us, you were the reason we stayed with Hensley & Co. If you're open to freelance work, let me know. We'd rather deal with you directly than anyone else." I read it twice, then a third time. Validation like that wasn't about pride, it was about proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that my work had value beyond their manipulation. I replied briefly, professionally, and shut my laptop. I could already imagine Dad's reaction when the clients started leaving one by one. The calls from home grew nastier as the day went on. Dad accused me of stealing documents. Mom claimed I was destroying the family legacy. Jenna sent a meme about betrayal. They were unraveling exactly as I expected and, truthfully, exactly as they deserved. I sat by the window, listening to the city outside, and thought about all the years I'd spent keeping that family together. I'd fixed every financial mistake, soothed every argument, patched every crack in their fragile image. And now, all it took was my absence for it all to collapse. The irony was delicious. By late afternoon, Dad showed his desperation. He texted me a single sentence: "If you don't come back by tomorrow, you'll regret it." I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself another cup of coffee and opened my laptop to finalize a few projects. I wasn't running from them, I was building something new. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. I almost ignored it, but the tone of the notification was different, slower, uncertain. When I played it, it wasn't my family. "Miss Hensley? This is Richard Radley, from Radley Financial. We've worked with your father's firm for years. I wanted to reach out directly, perhaps we can discuss an opportunity." I froze for a moment, the name replaying in my head. Radley Financial was my father's biggest client, one he'd bragged about constantly. If Mr. Radley was calling me, it meant my father's company was in deeper trouble than he could admit. I returned the call immediately. Mr. Radley's voice was calm but firm. "I'll be honest, Clara. Your father's business is in chaos without you. We've been trying to get reports, but no one knows where anything is. You were clearly the one keeping things running." His words hit me like a quiet vindication. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Radley," I said. "I'm no longer affiliated with Hensley & Co., but I'm open to discussing future work, independently." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say," he replied. "Let's set up a meeting tomorrow. I think we can help each other." After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone, the corners of my mouth lifting. This wasn't just revenge anymore, it was renewal. I glanced toward the window, where the city lights flickered against the dusk. The same world that once felt so small now looked endless. Every call, every insult from my family, was proof that I'd finally shaken the foundation they'd built on my back. Around 9 that night, another text came in from Jenna. "Dad's losing it. Clients are leaving. I hope you're happy." For the first time, I actually was. I typed one simple reply: "I'm free." Then I blocked her number. I sat on the couch, legs tucked under me, and let the quiet settle again. The chaos on their end didn't touch me anymore. The guilt they used to throw like chains around my neck had no weight left. As I drifted towards sleep, I pictured my father at his desk, papers scattered, phone ringing, reputation crumbling. For years, he'd told me I was nothing without him. Now, he was nothing without me. My phone buzzed one last time before I turned it off for the night, a new email notification. I opened it, expecting another insult or plea. But instead, it was from Mr. Radley again. "Let's meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. I have a position in mind for you full-time, with benefits. You've earned it." I leaned back, heart steady, eyes fixed on the screen. For the first time in my life, someone wanted me for what I could do, not for what I could sacrifice. Tomorrow I'd walk into that meeting with my head high, leaving behind every version of myself that begged for love in a house that never gave it. They thought my absence would punish me. They were wrong. It punished them. And now, the same independence they mocked would be the thing that destroyed their comfort completely. I smiled faintly as I whispered into the empty room. "This is only the beginning. Some doors close just so better ones can finally open." That's what I kept telling myself the next morning as I got ready to meet Mr. Richard Radley. I woke up before sunrise, nerves fluttering through my stomach, but underneath them was something steadier: control. I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair into a neat bun, studying the face staring back at me. Tired, yes, but free. There was no trace of the timid woman who'd once apologized for existing in her own home. I slipped into a crisp white blouse, black slacks, and the only pair of heels I owned. My outfit wasn't expensive, but it made me feel powerful, and that was enough. The meeting was at a sleek glass building downtown. As I rode the elevator up, I rehearsed what I'd say, careful to keep emotion out of my voice. I wasn't there to complain about my family or the company. I was there as Clara, an independent professional finally claiming her worth. Mr. Radley's office was large but warm. Bookshelves lined the walls, sunlight spilling across a mahogany desk. He stood when I entered, a tall man in his 50s with a kind smile. "Clara," he said, extending his hand. "I'm glad you came. I'll be honest, I always suspected your father's firm was only standing because of you." I smiled politely. "I appreciate that, Mr. Radley. I just tried to do my job the right way." He gestured for me to sit. "That's exactly what I want to talk about. We've been reviewing our partnerships, and frankly, we're looking to build a new department, something that needs precision, reliability, and discretion. All qualities you've shown. How would you feel about joining us full-time?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. Full-time. Benefits. My own title. Everything I'd never been offered by my own family. "I'd be honored," I said softly, keeping my composure even as relief swept through me. He smiled. "Good. I'll have our HR team send you the offer today. Take your time to review it, but I hope you'll say yes." When I left his office, sunlight felt different on my skin. Brighter, softer. I wasn't just walking away from my past anymore, I was walking towards something real. Back at my apartment, I sat by the window and opened the email from Radley Financial. A real salary, health insurance, paid vacation. The kind of security my parents had convinced me I didn't deserve. I signed the offer immediately. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself, nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread. But when I sat down to eat, I realized it was the first meal I'd cooked purely for my own joy. No one to feed, no one to serve, just me. The following week felt like a lifetime compressed into 7 days. I moved into a new place closer to work, a small studio apartment with white walls and big windows that let the morning light pour in. I bought a cheap rug, a second-hand bookshelf, and a few plants. Each item felt like a declaration. This is mine. Work at Radley Financial was demanding but fulfilling. Mr. Radley treated me with respect, something I wasn't used to. Every thank you, every nod of appreciation, every paycheck, it reminded me that I had value outside my family's house. For the first time in years, I laughed easily. I started journaling at night, writing about my progress, my fears, my healing. Sometimes I caught myself feeling guilty for being happy. It's strange how deep the conditioning runs when you've been taught that self-worth is selfishness. One afternoon, after a particularly good day at work, I got a message from Mom. Just 3 words. "We miss you." I stared at it for a long time, then locked my phone. I didn't believe her. Missing someone isn't the same as regretting what you've done to them. 2 days later, Jenna posted something on social media, an indirect jab. Some people love playing the victim when they're the problem. I rolled my eyes and scrolled past it. I no longer felt the need to defend myself. They were spiraling in the mess they'd created. My absence had exposed the rot beneath their perfect facade. My father's business was struggling, my mother was panicking, and Jenna was scrambling to protect her image. I didn't need revenge anymore. Watching them fall apart without me was enough. Still, there were moments when the loneliness crept in. Nights when I'd hear the faint echo of family laughter from my neighbor's apartment and feel an ache deep in my chest. I'd remind myself that peace can be lonely at first, but it's still peace. One evening, as I walked home from work, my phone buzzed with a new email from Mr. Radley again. "Clara, I just wanted to say I'm impressed with how smoothly you've transitioned. You've become indispensable here. Let's talk about expanding your responsibilities soon." I smiled. Indispensable. That word used to mean being trapped. Now it meant being valued. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine and opened my journal. I wrote about the strange beauty of starting over, the quiet triumph of not needing anyone's approval. Halfway through my entry, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. "Your father's not doing well. Please call me. He's furious about losing clients. He says you embarrassed him. I know he's hard on you. But please, Clara, think about the family." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Think about the family. That phrase had been their favorite weapon. Every time I wanted something for myself, they used it to pull me back into place. But not anymore. I didn't reply. I closed the message, finished my wine, and went back to writing. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Because deep down, I knew this was only the calm before the storm. People like my father didn't handle losing control quietly. And I had just taken away everything that made him powerful. Before going to bed, I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. I whispered to myself, "You're safe now." But as if the universe wanted to remind me how temporary peace could be, A loud knock echoed at my door the next morning. I froze, heart racing. No one knew my address at least. No one was supposed to. I hesitated before opening the door. On the floor was an envelope, thick and official looking, stamped with my father's company logo. Inside was a letter from his lawyer. The first line made my breath catch. You are hereby notified that legal action is being taken against you for theft of company data and client solicitation. I stood there in silence, the paper trembling in my hands. They couldn't stand to lose me, so they were trying to destroy me. I sat down slowly, the letter spread across the table, my heart beat loud in my ears. They'd taken everything I'd given them and now wanted to take my peace too. But this time, I wouldn't break. I whispered to myself, if it's war they want, I'll give them one. When I opened that envelope, I almost laughed. After everything they'd done, after years of using me, my father was now accusing me of stealing. The audacity almost felt absurd. But then the anger came, sharp and steady, replacing disbelief with resolve. I read the letter again, each word digging deeper. Theft of company data, client solicitation, damages to business reputation. It was a declaration of war, signed by my father's attorney, stamped with a smug confidence that made my stomach twist. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the papers. Part of me wanted to crumble, to cry the way I used to when they cornered me emotionally. But another part, the stronger part, refused. I wasn't that helpless girl anymore. I wouldn't let them rewrite the story. By noon, I was sitting in a downtown law office, explaining everything to a woman named Alyssa Crane, a sharp, calm attorney with steel-gray eyes and a voice that carried quiet power. She listened carefully, never interrupting, just nodding as I laid it all out, the unpaid work, the fake signatures, the emotional manipulation, and now the lawsuit. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Clara, she said, you've got nothing to be afraid of. What your father's doing is retaliation, and I think you might have a stronger case against him than he does against you. Her words steadied me. You really think so? I don't think, she said, smiling slightly. I know. Let's start by gathering evidence. For the next week, I worked with her day and night. I pulled every document I had: emails, invoices, tax records, even text messages that showed how much of the company I'd handled alone. I found emails where Dad thanked me for keeping the business afloat. Each one became another brick in the wall I was building between us. Alyssa was thorough. She made copies, took notes, asked specific questions. Did you ever receive pay? No. Any written agreement? None. How often did you handle client communication? Every day. By the third meeting, her expression had changed from calm to confident. He's in trouble, she said. You didn't just work for him. You were the business, without pay. That's wage theft, fraud, and possibly identity misuse. We filed a counterclaim for unpaid wages, emotional distress, and unauthorized use of personal information. It felt surreal, like stepping onto a battlefield I'd been preparing for my entire life without knowing it. The day the counterclaim was served, my phone exploded again. My father's voice filled my voicemail, furious and desperate. You ungrateful brat. You're destroying your own family. You think the law's going to save you? You'll regret this. I deleted it without listening to the rest. A few hours later, Mom called. Her voice was trembling, rehearsed. Clara, please, don't do this. You're airing private matters in public. Think about what people will say. I laughed bitterly. You cared about people's opinions when you ignored my birthday. You cared when you mocked me in that chat. Why should I care now? She sighed. We were just joking. No, I said softly. You were cruel. There's a difference. And I hung up. Days turned into weeks. The case gained quiet attention in the local business community. People began whispering about what was happening to the Hensleys. Old clients reached out to me privately, expressing support. We always knew something wasn't right there, one said. Mr. Radley even offered his own legal department's assistance. You have potential, Clara. Don't let them scare you into silence, he told me during a phone call. But fear was still there, hiding beneath my calm. At night, I'd wake up thinking about courtrooms, judges, my father's glare. The idea of standing across from him terrified me, but the thought of backing down terrified me more. Alyssa prepared me for everything. He'll try to twist the story, she warned. He'll call you emotional, unstable, ungrateful. Don't react. Let the evidence speak. When the court date finally came, I dressed in a simple navy suit and stood in front of the mirror, forcing myself to breathe evenly. "You're not his victim anymore," I whispered. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish, too clean to hold so much dirt. My father was already there, standing near his lawyer, looking older and angrier than I'd ever seen him. Mom sat behind him, clutching her purse, eyes red. Jenna was there too, whispering something bitter under her breath when she saw me. Alyssa placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Let them talk," she said. "We'll end it with truth." The proceedings were brutal but predictable. My father's lawyer painted me as a selfish daughter, a schemer who'd betrayed her family for money. I sat still, eyes forward, pretending his words were wind. Then it was Alyssa's turn. She presented every email, every message, every transaction I'd uncovered. Her voice was calm, surgical. Each document landed like a hammer. The judge's expression shifted as the truth unraveled. When Alyssa showed proof that my father had used my signature on tax filings without authorization, there was an audible gasp in the courtroom. For a moment, my father's mask slipped. His jaw tightened, his hands fidgeted. That night, back in my apartment, Alyssa called. Her voice was steady but carried something new, a hint of victory. "Clara, I think it's going in our favor. But there's more. We just got an update from the bank records." My chest tightened. "What kind of update?" She hesitated. "It looks like your father didn't just misuse your name for tax forms. He took out a business loan under your identity. It's serious. You'll need to see this in person tomorrow." I felt the air leave my lungs. "A loan? Under my name?" "Yes," she said. "And the documents are signed with your signature." I gripped the edge of the table, the world tilting for a second. "How much?" "Enough to ruin his life," she said. "But also enough to ruin yours if we don't handle it fast." When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, the city humming outside my window. They had tried to destroy me to save themselves, and now their lies were finally surfacing. I wasn't scared anymore, not even angry, just ready. I whispered to myself. They wanted a fight, now they'll get the truth instead. Alyssa's voice was calm, but what she said left me frozen. A loan under my name, something I never applied for, never signed. My father hadn't just exploited me, he'd become me on paper. I spent the night pacing the apartment, the floor creaking under every step. My mind kept replaying all the times I'd signed blank documents because he told me they were routine. Every memory felt like a fresh betrayal. I wanted to believe there was a limit to how far he'd go, but there wasn't. The next morning, I went straight to Alyssa's office. She slid a folder across the table without a word. Inside were the loan documents, $85,000 borrowed under my name for business expansion. My forged signature sat neatly at the bottom. The date was 2 years ago. I stared at it, numb. "He used my identity," I whispered. Alyssa nodded. "He did. And from what I can tell, the payments stopped months ago. The account's delinquent. The debt collectors will come after you if we don't move fast." The room felt suddenly smaller. I gripped the edge of the desk. "Can we prove it was him?" She leaned forward, her expression firm. "Yes. The digital trail is sloppy. The loan application came from the same IP address as his office. We'll file an identity theft report immediately." "But, Clara, this could lead to criminal charges for him." I swallowed hard. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired. "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I just want to be free." Alyssa's voice softened. "Then let's finish this properly." That afternoon, we went to the police station to file the report. Sitting in that small, fluorescent room, I gave my statement slowly, carefully, explaining every detail, the family business, the forged signature, the lawsuit, everything. The officer took notes, nodding occasionally. By the time we left, I felt both heavier and lighter. It was official now. My father wasn't just cruel, he was a criminal. The next few weeks blurred together. The police began investigating. My parents must have realized something was wrong because the calls started again. First, Mom. Then Jenna. I ignored them both until one night when Mom's message came through, trembling and desperate. "Clara, your father knows what you did. Please, just drop it. He's terrified. The police came by the office today. You don't understand how serious this is." I played the message twice. The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't understand how serious it was. He'd stolen from me, lied under oath, and now I was the one who needed to stop? Alyssa kept me updated on the case's progress. "They're gathering financial records," she said one morning over coffee. "It's going to get worse before it gets better. Are you ready for that?" "I've been living in worse for years," I told her. "I can handle it." Still, I couldn't shake the small ache that came with every step forward. There's a kind of grief that comes from watching the people who raised you become strangers. I'd spent most of my life trying to please them, and now all I wanted was distance. At work, Mr. Radley noticed I seemed distracted. After a meeting, he caught me in the hallway. "Clara, you've been holding the company together these past few weeks, but you look like you're carrying something heavy. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, then nodded faintly. "It's personal, but it's almost over." He smiled kindly. "Good, because when this storm passes, I think you're going to be unstoppable." That night, I came home to find a thick envelope under my door. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from my father. "Clara, I made mistakes, but dragging the law into this was cruel. You could ruin everything. Think about what this will do to your mother, to Jenna. You've already humiliated me enough. If you have any love left for your family, you'll stop now. We can fix this privately. I'll make things right." The words felt hollow. I knew what privately meant behind closed doors, where he could twist everything again. I tore the letter in half and dropped it in the trash. The next morning, the story broke in the local business news. Hensley & Co. under business news. Investigation for financial misconduct and identity fraud allegations. I stared at the headline on my phone, heart racing. The story didn't mention me by name, but everyone who knew us would know. Within hours, Jenna called again, her voice raw. "Are you happy now, Clara? You've destroyed us. Everyone's talking. Dad's freaking out, Mom's crying. You've turned this into a circus." I waited until she stopped shouting. "No, Jenna," I said quietly. "Dad destroyed us. I'm just not cleaning up his mess anymore." She hung up on me. Later that day, Mr. Radley called me into his office again. I braced myself for bad news, but he simply said, "You've handled this with more grace than most people could. I want you to know we're standing by you, no matter what happens." His words nearly broke me. After a lifetime of conditional love, hearing unconditional support felt foreign. I managed a small smile. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." By the end of the month, the investigation deepened. My father's accounts were frozen, and his business began collapsing. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just watched it all unfold quietly, a part of me mourning the family I'd never really had. One night, as I sat journaling, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the name Jenna. "Please come home. Mom's in the hospital." For a long moment, I couldn't move. The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. No matter what had happened, she was still my mother. I closed my journal and grabbed my coat. The drive back to my hometown was silent, except for the hum of the engine and my thoughts racing. I hadn't been back in months. I didn't know what waited for me there, regret, anger, or something in between. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I sat there for a moment, staring at the entrance. My chest ached with a strange mix of dread and pity. They'd broken me in, every way imaginable. But now, I was walking back not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman they could no longer control. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Time to see what's left of them." Then I stepped out of the car and walked inside. Part of me wanted to ignore the message. After everything they'd done, after every sleepless night and scar their betrayal left behind, the idea of running back to them felt wrong. But another part, the daughter part, couldn't turn away. No matter how much I hated what they'd done, a sliver of me still remembered what it felt like to hope they cared. The hospital was an hour away, but it felt like driving through a lifetime. The roads were familiar yet distant, like a dream I'd outgrown. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, and I kept rehearsing what I'd say if I saw them. I promised myself I wouldn't cry. I promised myself I wouldn't let them pull me back into their chaos. When I walked into the hospital lobby, the smell of antiseptic hit me first, sharp, cold, sterile. At the front desk, a nurse directed me to room 217. My heart pounded as I approached the door. I almost turned around, but then I heard a faint cough inside and forced myself to push it open. Mom was sitting up in bed, her skin pale against the white sheets. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, but her eyes, those familiar, sharp eyes, looked smaller now. Fragile. She blinked when she saw me. Clara. Her voice cracked on my name. I stood by the doorway, arms crossed. Jenna said you were sick. She nodded slowly. It was a heart attack. Mild, they said. But it scared me. I stepped closer but didn't touch her. Are you okay? Her lips trembled into something like a smile. Getting there. She gestured to the chair beside her. Sit, please. I hesitated, then sat down. The silence between us was heavy years of unspoken pain hanging in the air. I didn't think you'd come, she said softly. I almost didn't, I admitted. She looked down at her hands, twisting the blanket between her fingers. Clara, I know things got out of hand. Your father, he can be difficult, but I cut her off. He didn't just get out of hand, Mom. He forged my signature. He stole from me. And you knew he was using me for years. You just stood by and watched. Her eyes filled with tears. But I didn't stop. You laughed when they mocked me on my birthday. You called me dramatic. You let him use me like free labor. And you never once said thank you. So please don't tell me things just got out of hand. The tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't know how to stop him, she whispered. I didn't know how to protect you. I shook my head. You didn't even try. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Machines beeped softly, nurses passed by the doorway, but inside that room, time didn't move. Finally, she said, I'm sorry, Clara. Her voice broke. I should have been better. I should have seen what he was doing to you. I wanted those words to matter, but they didn't. Apologies can't rebuild what was never built to last. Still, something in her tone, something small and human, made me soften just slightly. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. And for a brief moment, I let her hold it. It felt strange, familiar but foreign, like holding onto a ghost. The door creaked open then, and Jenna stepped in. Her eyes flicked between us, suspicion tightening her face. You came, she said flatly. Yeah, I said. I did. Jenna crossed her arms. Dad's not happy you're here. He said you'd try to make this about you. I laughed quietly. Of course he did. She frowned. Why are you doing this to us, Clara? You've ruined everything. The business, the house, he says we might lose it. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was still my sister, but she wore Dad's words like armor. You think I did this? You're the one suing him, she snapped. You're the one who called the police. I kept my tone calm. No, Jenna. He called the police on himself when he forged my name and stole my future. She didn't respond. For a moment, the tension cracked. Her bravado slipped, and I saw the scared girl underneath, but she turned and left before I could say anything else. After she was gone, Mom sighed weakly. She's angry, but she doesn't understand everything yet. She doesn't want to, I said. None of you ever did. I stayed for another hour, talking about nothing important: the weather, her medication, the hospital food. Before I left, I stood by her bed and looked down at her. I hope you recover, Mom. But I can't be part of this family anymore. I can't keep bleeding for people who never notice the wounds. Her eyes filled again. Will I ever see you again? I thought about it carefully. Maybe, but not until I can do it without pain. I turned and walked out before she could answer. Outside, the sun was setting, turning the hospital windows gold. I felt hollow but calm. Closure isn't clean, it never is, but that conversation had given me something I didn't know I needed. Confirmation that I was right to leave. I checked into a small motel that night instead of driving back immediately. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach, and the hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. I took out my journal and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's just letting go of the weight you no longer want to carry." When I woke the next morning, I drove back to my apartment. As I unlocked the door, I saw a thick envelope on the floor, another letter. My stomach tightened when I saw the return address. It wasn't from the hospital. It was from a law firm. I sat down on the couch, tore it open, and read the first line. Our client, Mr. Gregory Hensley, requests that you cease all legal and public communication regarding his ongoing investigation. Another threat. Another attempt to silence me. I smiled coldly and placed the letter in a folder labeled Evidence. I wasn't scared anymore. The more they tried to break me, the more power I found in standing tall. I looked out the window, sunlight spilling across my hands, and whispered, "You can't control what you can't reach anymore." Then I opened my laptop and began typing a new entry for the case. My story wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. It was their final attempt to control me and their biggest mistake yet. The letter from my father's lawyer wasn't a warning. It was a threat disguised in legal language, meant to scare me into silence. But fear was something they'd already taken from me. I wasn't going to hand it back. I sat at my kitchen table, rereading the document under the morning light. Every word reeked of desperation. Cease and desist, defamation, family reputation. Those phrases used to make me anxious. Now, they made me smile. They were losing control, and this letter was proof. I forwarded the document to Alyssa. Within minutes, she called me. "He's bluffing," she said firmly. "Your father's lawyer has no case. He's trying to intimidate you because the fraud investigation is closing in." "Should I respond?" I asked. She chuckled. "No. Let me do that for you. It's time we stop playing defense." That phrase stayed with me, stop playing defense. I'd spent my entire life defending myself against people who were supposed to love me. It was time to fight back. A week later, we were back in court. The air in the courtroom felt electric, thick with tension, whispers, and the faint click of pens from reporters sitting in the back row. The story had drawn local attention now. A daughter suing her father, a respected businessman facing criminal fraud. It was a programmed spectacle. But for me, it wasn't about headlines. It was about truth. Dad sat across from me at the plaintiff's table, jaw tight, eyes cold. His once confident posture looked strained. Mom was beside him, avoiding my gaze. Jenna sat behind them, arms folded, glaring at me as if I were the one who'd broken their family. Alyssa leaned close and whispered, "Stay calm. No emotion. You've already won more ground than you realize." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. My father's lawyer started the proceedings with a performance painting him as a misunderstood man, betrayed by an ungrateful daughter. "She's exaggerating her role in the business," he said, his voice smooth and theatrical. "Family disagreements shouldn't be turned into legal warfare." Alyssa rose when it was her turn, calm but deadly precise. "This isn't a family disagreement, Your Honor. This is identity fraud, financial manipulation, and coercive control. And we have proof." She handed over folders of evidence, emails, financial records, the loan documents with my forged signature. As the judge flipped through them, my father's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Then Alyssa called the first witness, one of my father's former clients. The man testified that I had managed all communication, contracts, and payments for years. "Honestly," he said, glancing toward my father, "I thought Clara was the company." When it was my turn to testify, I stood slowly, my palms steady despite the weight of 100 eyes watching me. Alyssa's voice was gentle but firm. "Clara, can you tell the court what your role at Hensley & Co. was?" I looked at the judge, not at my father. "I handled everything: accounts, taxes, payroll, client relations. I worked full-time without pay because I was told family didn't need contracts." "Did you ever agree to be a co-signer or loan guarantor for the business?" "No," I said clearly. "My father forged my name," the courtroom murmured. My father's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a glance. Then, Alyssa pulled up the digital evidence, the IP addresses, the timestamps, the email chains proving my father's deceit. Every detail aligned perfectly, each piece dismantling his defense. When my father finally took the stand, his arrogance had curdled into fear. His voice shook as he tried to deny everything. But the documents spoke louder than his lies. At one point, Alyssa asked, "Mr. Hensley, if your daughter was not an employee, why do these internal emails show you relying on her for every financial report?" He stammered. "She liked helping. It was her choice." I watched the judge's expression harden. Then Alyssa delivered the blow. She handed over the original loan contract. "Your Honor, this document shows a forged signature. The handwriting expert's report confirms it is not Miss Hensley's." The room fell silent. My father's face turned gray. He leaned back, jaw clenching, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. Mom closed her eyes, shoulders trembling. The judge's gavel hit once. That will be enough. After hours of testimony and evidence, the decision was clear. The fraud claim was upheld. My father was found guilty of identity theft, financial misconduct, and unpaid wages. He was ordered to repay every cent he owed me and face potential criminal charges. The courtroom buzzed, whispers spreading like wildfire. I sat there, motionless, my heart pounding. It was over. The years of silence, the humiliation, the manipulation, all of it collapsed in one ruling. Jenna stormed out of the courtroom, slamming the door behind her. Mom stayed seated, staring at nothing, her hands clasped tightly as if praying for something that couldn't be saved. When the judge adjourned, I gathered my papers slowly. Alyssa turned to me with a small smile. "You did it," I exhaled shakily. "No, we did it." As we walked out into the hallway, flashes from cameras lit up. Reporters swarmed forward, microphones in hand. One voice cut through the chaos. "Clara, do you have anything to say to your family?" I stopped, turning toward the cameras. For years, I'd stayed quiet, invisible, obedient. But not today. I looked straight ahead and said, "Family doesn't mean ownership. Blood doesn't excuse abuse." The hallway went silent. I walked past them all, out into the bright afternoon. The sunlight hit my face, and for the first time in my life, it didn't burn, it warmed. When I got home that evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. My phone buzzed non-stop, messages of support, job offers, friends I hadn't heard from in years reaching out. But I ignored them all. I just wanted peace. Alyssa called once more to confirm the paperwork. "The settlement will come through soon. He'll face additional hearings for the criminal side. You don't have to attend unless you want to." "I won't," I said softly. "I've already seen enough." After the call, I stared at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back wasn't broken anymore. She was calm, steady, unshakable. I whispered to the empty room, "It's finally over." But even as I said it, I knew closure wasn't something that came in a courtroom. It came slowly, quietly, in the moments that followed. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let the silence settle. And somewhere deep inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace that wasn't borrowed, earned, or stolen. It was mine. For years, I'd been silent. I'd swallowed my pain, hidden my worth, and let other people tell my story. But now, the world was finally listening, and for once, I wasn't going to hide. The morning after the verdict, the news spread everywhere. Articles appeared on local blogs and business sites. "Daughter exposes family fraud, Hensley & Co. collapses amid scandal." My phone buzzed non-stop with messages from people I barely remembered. Some were old classmates offering sympathy. Others were strangers calling me brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt free. Still, seeing my family's name in headlines made my stomach twist. I never wanted attention, I wanted justice. But justice has a way of drawing light, and once that light hits, it reveals everything, especially the things people tried hardest to bury. At work, everyone already knew. Mr. Radley called me into his office that morning. His expression wasn't judgmental, it was respectful. "Clara," he said, folding his hands on the desk, "I read about the case. I want you to know you've handled yourself with more dignity than most people could manage under that kind of pressure." "Thank you," I said quietly. "I didn't do it to be strong. I just didn't have a choice." He nodded. "Sometimes that's what real strength is. Take the day if you need it. But when you're ready, we have some new opportunities I'd like to discuss. You've earned them." His kindness made my chest tighten. For so long I'd been told that I wasn't enough, that my work only mattered if it served someone else. Now I was being seen, truly seen for who I was. When I got home that evening, social media was flooded with comments. People were dissecting my story, sharing their own experiences with toxic families and manipulation. Some called me a hero. Others accused me of being heartless or vindictive. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't owe the world my pain, but I did decide to tell my story on my own terms. A week later, I was invited to speak on a podcast called Unheard Voices, which focused on emotional abuse and recovery. I hesitated at first, worried it would reopen wounds I'd just begun to close. But something inside me said it was time. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted to reclaim my voice. The studio was quiet, dimly lit, with soft music playing in the background. The host, Amelia Grant, smiled warmly as she adjusted the microphone. "Clara," she said, "thank you for being here. I know this isn't easy." I took a deep breath. "It's not." But silence was worse. For an hour, I talked not just about the lawsuit, but about the years of small betrayals that led up to it. The way my family dismissed my feelings, the invisible labor, the birthday they forgot on purpose. I talked about the moment I decided to stop giving to people who only took. Amelia listened intently, occasionally nodding, sometimes wiping away a tear. When I finished, she said, "If you could say one thing to your younger self, the version of you still trying to earn their love, what would it be?" I paused. The microphone felt heavy in my hands. I'd tell her she doesn't need to prove her worth, that love shouldn't have to be earned through suffering. When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. My inbox filled with messages from women across the country, some thanking me, others sharing their own stories of finally walking away. It was humbling, knowing that my pain had become a lantern for someone else's darkness. Meanwhile, my father's downfall was complete. His business license was revoked. The fraud charges moved into the criminal phase. Every client he'd once bragged about had dropped him. Mom filed for divorce 2 months after the ruling. I found out through a local newspaper. She cited irreconcilable differences and moved in with her sister across town. I didn't call her, and she didn't call me. Some distances aren't born from anger, they're born from exhaustion. Jenna disappeared from social media entirely. For a while I checked, half out of curiosity, half out of habit. Then I stopped. She needed to face her own reflection without me there to absorb the blame. As the months passed, the noise around my name began to fade. People moved on to other stories, other scandals. But something had shifted in me permanently. I no longer saw myself as a victim. I was someone who had walked through fire and didn't come out burned, just different. One evening, while walking home from work, a young woman stopped me on the street. She looked nervous but determined. "Are you Clara Hensley?" she asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. She smiled shyly. "I listened to your podcast. Because of you, I finally left my father's business. I was scared I'd be lost without it, but I'm not. I just wanted to say, thank you." I didn't know what to say. For so long, I'd felt invisible. Now, my story had given someone else permission to be seen. I managed a soft smile. "You did that for yourself, but I'm glad I could help you see it." She nodded and walked away, leaving me standing under the glow of the streetlight, the cool evening air brushing my face. That night, I went home and cooked myself dinner, grilled vegetables and rice, simple and comforting. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Hey Clara. It's Jenna. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'd like to talk. I'm getting married soon, and the date happens to be on your birthday. I'd really like you to come." I stared at the message, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The irony was almost too perfect. I set the phone down, letting the quiet stretch. For the first time in years, an invitation from my family didn't fill me with dread. Just clarity. Maybe this was the universe's strange way of offering closure. I picked up my phone again and typed a short reply. "I'll think about it." Then I turned off the lights, sat in the soft glow of the city, and whispered to myself, "They once forgot my birthday. Now they can't forget me." I stared at Jenna's message for hours, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or throw my phone across the room. My little sister, who had once mocked me for caring about my own birthday, was now getting married on it, and wanted me to attend. Life had a cruel sense of irony. For a long time, I just sat there in silence, the city lights outside flickering through my window. I thought about everything that had happened, the lawsuit, the betrayal, the headlines. Part of me wanted to ignore the message completely, to leave her words unread and her guilt unresolved. But another part, quieter and older, wondered if this was the final page of a story I needed to close myself. I typed a reply, erased it, then typed again. "I'll be there." When the day finally came, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the silver necklace I'd bought for myself months ago, the one that read, "Enough." I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pinned neatly at the back. I didn't need to impress anyone. I just wanted to look like a woman who'd survived. The venue was a charming countryside inn about an hour outside the city, all white walls and hanging lights. I arrived early, stepping out of the car to the faint sound of laughter and music drifting from inside. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders and walked in. The moment I entered, heads turned. Some faces I recognized, distant relatives, old neighbors. Their smiles faltered as soon as they realized who I was. I could almost hear their thoughts. That's her, the daughter who sued her father. Jenna spotted me from across the room, her face frozen for a moment before she smiled nervously. Clara, you came. I said I would, I replied, my voice calm. She looked stunning, radiant in her gown, though her eyes carried the same anxious energy she'd always had. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Neither did I admitted. Her fiancé, Ethan, came over. Then a tall man with kind eyes, shaking my hand warmly. Clara, it's great to finally meet you. Jenna's told me a lot about you. I forced a polite smile. Hopefully some of it was true. He laughed lightly, glancing at Jenna, who avoided eye contact. It was clear she hadn't told him much. The ceremony was beautiful, almost painfully so. Fairy lights twinkled overhead as Jenna walked down the aisle, and for a brief moment, I remembered her as the little girl who used to braid my hair and sneak into my bed when thunderstorms scared her. That memory softened something in me, but the sweetness didn't last long. During the reception, as guests toasted the couple, I could feel the weight of whispers circling around me. My mother was there too, sitting quietly at a corner table, her hair streaked with gray now. Our eyes met once, hers full of unspoken regret, mine unreadable. My father was nowhere to be seen. I wasn't surprised. When it came time for dinner, I found myself seated beside an older couple I vaguely recognized. They smiled politely and tried to make small talk, but eventually, the question came. So, Clara, the woman said carefully, how are things between you and your family now? I smiled faintly, cutting into my food. Civil, but distant. Some things aren't meant to go back to the way they were. They nodded awkwardly, sensing they'd stepped on a landmine. The conversation quickly shifted to the weather. As the night went on, I noticed people glancing at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Some pitied me, others judged me, but none of it mattered anymore. I'd spent too long trying to control how others saw me. Tonight wasn't about appearances, it was about closure. When the music started, Jenna took the microphone to thank everyone for coming. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. There's someone here tonight I didn't think would come, she said, glancing toward me. Clara, I just want to say, it means a lot that you're here. The crowd turned to look. I gave a small nod, nothing more. I didn't need a spotlight. After that, I slipped outside for some air. The night was cool, the sky scattered with stars. For a moment, I stood there in silence, watching fireflies flicker near the hedges. I'd never realized how peaceful solitude could feel until I learned it wasn't the same as loneliness. I heard footsteps behind me. Jenna's voice came softly. I knew I'd find you out here. I turned to face her. She had changed out of her heels, holding them in one hand. The wedding lights from inside glowed faintly behind her, making her look more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Everything okay? I asked. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I didn't know how to talk to you in there. Everyone's watching. I noticed, I said dryly. She sighed, lowering her head. I deserved that. We stood in silence for a few seconds before she spoke again, her voice cracking slightly. Clara, I'm sorry. For everything. For taking their side, for believing what they said about you. I thought Dad was doing what was best for the family, but I see now he was just doing what was best for himself. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them. I was jealous of you, she continued. You were always the responsible one, the one who held everything together, and they made me feel like I could never measure up. I thought hurting you would make me feel better. It didn't. I looked at her for a long time before responding. You could have just talked to me, Jenna. I would have helped you if you'd asked. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it worse. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere inside, people laughed and glasses clinked, but out here it was quiet. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said softly. Not yet, but I don't hate you, either. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. That's enough for me. For the first time in years, we stood side by side without resentment thick between us. The silence wasn't painful, it was almost peaceful. Before she went back inside, Jenna reached into her pocket and handed me a small envelope. This is for you, she said. Open it later. I took it but didn't open it right away. As she walked back toward the glowing hall, I stood there a moment longer, feeling the night air on my skin, the quiet hum of closure settling in my chest. When I finally looked down at the envelope, my name was written in Jenna's neat handwriting. I didn't know what was inside, But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to find out. I slipped it into my purse, whispering to myself, maybe some endings aren't bitter. Maybe they're just quiet. For the first time in years, Jenna's voice didn't carry anger, it carried regret. After she handed me that envelope, I couldn't bring myself to open it right away. I drove home with it, sitting in the passenger seat, glancing at it every few minutes as if it might speak on its own. By the time I parked outside my apartment, it felt heavier than paper had any right to be. I sat at my kitchen table, the envelope in front of me, my fingers tracing the edge. I thought about the wedding, the way Jenna had looked at me under the glow of the lights, her eyes soft but full of guilt. For years, she'd been my biggest critic, my father's echo, my mirror in all the wrong ways. But something had changed in her that night, something real. I tore it open carefully. Inside was a short letter, written in Jenna's neat handwriting, the same looping cursive she'd used on school notes when we were kids. Clara, I don't know where to start. I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't ask for it. I just need you to know that I finally see everything you tried to tell us. You were never the problem. You were the one holding us together while we broke you down. I was jealous. You were responsible, kind, patient, everything I couldn't be. I thought Dad's approval meant strength, but I realize now it meant control. I'm sorry I helped him hurt you. I'm sorry I laughed when I should have listened. I found this photo while packing for the wedding. It's from our childhood. Maybe you'll remember why I kept it. Jenna. A small photograph fell out of the envelope, a faded picture of us sitting on the back steps of our old house. I was about 10, she was 7. We were holding melting popsicles, faces sticky and smiling. Mom must have taken it before the bitterness began, before the distance grew. For a long time, I just stared at it. The memory behind that picture was warm, uncomplicated. That was the version of us I missed, the one that existed before resentment took root. I placed the photo on the table and wiped my eyes. The tears weren't angry this time. They were soft, slow, necessary. The next morning, I called her. She answered on the second ring. Clara? Yeah, I said quietly. I got your letter. There was a pause, followed by a shaky breath. I didn't know if you'd read it. I did. Thank you, she exhaled, relief audible through the line. You don't have to say anything else, I just needed to tell you the truth. I know, I said. But you did something I never thought you would, you took responsibility. I should have done it years ago, she whispered. I watched him use you, and I didn't stop it. I joined in because it was easier to be on his side than to risk being you. Her words cut deep, but they also rang with honesty. We both were. Silence stretched between us. Not the heavy, bitter silence we used to share, but the kind that carries unspoken understanding. I don't know if I can make things right, she said. But I want to try. Then start by being better to yourself, I told her. That's where I started too. She sniffled softly. You really changed, Clara. I had to, I said. Survival has a way of doing that. We talked for a while longer, nothing deep, just small fragments of a connection we both thought was lost. When the call ended, I felt lighter, as if I'd set down something I'd been carrying for too long. That weekend, I framed the photo Jenna had sent me and placed it on my bookshelf. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded me of who we were before life turned cruel. Over the next few weeks, Jenna sent small updates about her new life, how her husband was kind, how she was thinking of going back to school, how she was trying therapy. Her messages were simple but consistent. I responded politely, never too cold, never too open. Healing didn't mean forgetting, it meant choosing boundaries that kept me safe. One afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Mom. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, but something in me was curious. When I picked up, her voice was frail but calm. Jenna told me you two talked, she said. Yeah, I replied cautiously. She said you forgave her. I didn't, I said honestly. But I listened. She sighed softly. That's more than I deserve too. Her honesty surprised me. How are you, Mom? Tired, she admitted. I left the house. I'm living with Aunt Carol now. I had to sell a lot of things to pay the debts your father left behind. There was no anger in her tone, just weariness. He ruined everything, she continued. But maybe that's what it took for me to see what I allowed. I'm sorry, Clara. Truly. It took me a moment to respond. I believe you, I said finally. But belief isn't forgiveness. It's just a start. That's all I can ask for. she whispered. We didn't talk long, but when the call ended, I realized that some apologies don't heal the past, they just close it gently enough that it stops bleeding. That night, I sat by the window again, looking at the framed photo. My reflection shimmered beside those two smiling girls frozen in time. I thought about how much I'd changed, how much we'd changed. Forgiveness wasn't a moment. It was a slow unraveling of bitterness, replaced by quiet understanding. I didn't need to forget what they did. I just needed to stop letting it define who I was. The next morning, Jenna texted me a photo of a sunrise with a message, "New beginnings." I stared at it for a moment, then replied, "Let's hope so." I knew our relationship would never return to what it once was, but maybe it could become something new, something honest. That evening, I poured myself a cup of tea and opened my journal. I wrote, "Healing doesn't come when they apologize. It comes when you realize their actions no longer have power." As I closed the journal, my phone buzzed again. A number I hadn't seen in months flashed on the screen. Dad. For a moment, my breath caught. I stared at his name, debating whether to answer. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from old instinct. Finally, I pressed accept. "Clara," his voice rasped. "Older. It's me." I took a deep breath and said quietly, "I know." His voice was older, slower, and almost unrecognizable. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. The man who had once filled every room with his presence now sounded like a shadow of himself. "Clara," he said again, coughing lightly. "I didn't think you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," I replied. A silence settled between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, the faint hum of a television in the background. Somewhere a clock ticked. It struck me how quiet his world must be now, how empty. "I just wanted to talk," he said finally. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say some things." I didn't stop him. I didn't comfort him either. I just listened. "I lost everything," he continued, his voice trembling slightly. "The business is gone. The house sold. The accounts are empty. Your mother left. Jenna doesn't answer my calls. I'm living in a small apartment now, above a store. I've got nothing left, Clara. Nothing." I didn't say it, but part of me thought, "Now you know how you made me feel." He sighed deeply, the sound rough and tired. "You were right. About everything. I did those things. The loans, the signatures, all of it. I thought I was protecting the family, but I was really protecting myself. I was a coward." The confession didn't bring satisfaction, it brought silence. Years of pain don't dissolve with an apology, especially when it comes too late. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Why tell me this after destroying everything?" "Because there's no one else left to tell," he said softly. "And because I don't want to die with it on my conscience." I froze at that last part. "Are you sick?" "Not officially," he said with a short, bitter laugh. "But I'm not well either. My doctor says the stress has taken a toll. I don't sleep much. I barely eat. And every night, I think about you. About what I did." He paused. "You didn't deserve any of it." The words should have made me feel something: anger, pity, closure, but all I felt was a quiet exhaustion. There was nothing left to say that could undo what had already been done. "I used to think control made me strong," he continued, voice faltering. "That if I kept everyone in line, the world couldn't hurt us. But all I did was break the people who loved me most." "You didn't break me," I said softly. There was a long pause. "No," he whispered. "You didn't break. You walked away. You were stronger than I ever was." The truth in that hit both of us hard. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said finally. "I'm sorry for every word, every lie, every time I made you feel small. I can't make it right, but I needed to say it." I closed my eyes. The apology I'd waited for my whole life didn't bring tears. It brought a quiet understanding of what closure really was, accepting that some wounds will always ache, even when they've healed. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I don't owe you anything anymore." He didn't argue. He just breathed, long and shaky. "I know," he said softly. "You've given enough." We sat in silence for several seconds, just listening to the faint hum of the line between us. "Do you ever think you'll forgive me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked out my window, watching the city lights blur against the glass. "Maybe in another lifetime," I said. He exhaled slowly. "That's fair." We talked a little longer about mundane things, the weather, the neighborhood he lived in, his regrets, but there was no warmth left to rekindle. We were two people bound by blood but separated by everything else. Finally, he said, "Thank you for answering, Clara. I didn't deserve that kindness." "It wasn't kindness," I said. "It was closure." He chuckled weakly. "Always the honest one." His voice grew faint. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart." The word sweetheart caught me off guard. It was the first time I'd heard him say it in over a decade. "Goodbye, Dad," I said quietly. "Goodbye," he whispered back. When the call ended, I just sat there, phone still in my hand, the silence echoing louder than his words ever had. I didn't cry. There was no sadness left to give him. Just a sense of finality, sharp and clean like the closing of a door that had been left open too long. I walked to my desk and opened my journal. On the last page I wrote, "Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for the part of you that still aches. And when that ache fades, you realize you don't need their permission to heal." Then I closed the journal and placed it beside the framed photo of Jenna and me as children. The two of us, smiling in sunlight, untouched by all the things that would come later. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. The world felt softer somehow, cleaner, quieter. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up. That phone call had ended more than just a conversation. It had ended a lifetime of waiting for an apology that would never fix what was broken. As I sipped my coffee, a strange calm filled me. I realized I was free not because he had finally said sorry, but because I no longer needed anything from him at all. When I finished my coffee, I opened my new journal. The first page was blank, waiting. I wrote at the top, "The life I choose for myself." Outside, the clouds began to part, and sunlight spilled across my desk. I smiled faintly and whispered, "They gave me nothing, but I found everything." Just then, a soft knock echoed at my door. I frowned, setting down my pen. No one ever visited this early. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it slowly. There, on the mat, was a small white box with a silver ribbon. No name, no note. My breath caught. I bent down, picked it up, and carried it inside, my heart suddenly racing. Whatever it was, it felt like the beginning of something new. A year later, I spent my birthday exactly how I'd always wished, quietly, peacefully, and on my own terms. There were no awkward family dinners, no fake smiles, no empty wishes spoken out of obligation. Just me, a cup of coffee, sunlight streaming through my apartment window, and the feeling of absolute calm that only comes after surviving a storm. The small white box with the silver ribbon still sat on my dresser. I had opened it that morning the year before. Inside had been a delicate silver bracelet engraved with two simple words, "You're enough." There was no card, no sender, no clue who had left it at my door. Maybe it was Jenna, maybe Mom, maybe no one I knew at all, but I liked the mystery. It made me believe that kindness could still find me, even when I wasn't looking for it. I wore the bracelet every day after that. It became more than jewelry, it was a promise to myself. A reminder that I didn't need anyone else to tell me I mattered. That morning, I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the city below slowly come alive. People hurried down sidewalks, cars honked in the distance, and life went on as it always did. But for me, it was different now. Every breath I took felt deliberate, earned. I spent the day doing small things that made me happy. I went to a quiet cafe near the park and ordered a slice of strawberry cake, something I hadn't let myself enjoy in years. The barista smiled and wished me a happy birthday after noticing the candle I'd asked for on top. "Celebrating alone?" she asked gently. I smiled. Celebrating freedom. Afterward, I walked through the park, the air crisp and bright. Children laughed near the fountain, couples held hands, and I didn't feel envious, I just felt content. There was a time when seeing moments like that reminded me of what I didn't have. Now, they reminded me of what I'd built within myself. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jenna. "Happy birthday, Clara. I hope you're doing something that makes you smile today. Love you." I stared at the message for a moment, a small warmth blooming in my chest. I typed back simply, "Thank you, Jenna. I am." No bitterness. No resentment. Just truth. A few hours later, Mom called. I hesitated before answering, but something told me to pick up. Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said softly. "I didn't know if you'd answer." I did. I replied. Love you, she continued. For everything you've done, for surviving all of it. I'm sorry it took me so long to see who you really are. Her words didn't erase the past, but they didn't sting either. They were simple, human, real. Thank you, Mom, I said quietly. That means more than you think. We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. When the call ended, I felt a gentle peace settle over me. In the evening, I cooked myself a dinner that filled the apartment with warmth-roasted chicken, vegetables, and a small glass of red wine. The smell reminded me of the meals I used to make for everyone else, except this time, it was just for me. Every bite tasted like closure. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I sat on the balcony with my journal and began to write. I'd filled 3 of them over the past year, pages full of pain, lessons, and quiet triumphs. This one was different, though. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about living. I wrote, "Freedom isn't loud. It's the quiet morning when you wake up and realize you don't dread the day ahead. It's cooking for one, and feeling full. It's knowing that the people who broke you no longer have the power to define you. It's choosing peace over approval." I paused, looking down at my bracelet as the silver caught the last streak of sunlight. "You're enough," I smiled. At 8 p.m., there was a soft knock at the door. My heart skipped. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, I hesitated, remembering the white box from last year. When I opened the door, there was no one there, just another small package. This time wrapped in gold paper with a simple white ribbon. I picked it up carefully and brought it inside. On top was a note, handwritten in neat script. "You gave them nothing and gave yourself everything. Happy birthday, Clara." My breath caught. The handwriting was familiar but faintly so. It looked like Jenna's, but more confident, steadier. I smiled and carefully unwrapped the box. Inside was a small framed photo, the same one she'd sent me before, the 2 of us as children. But now it was cleaned, restored, and placed beside a second photo. One of me alone, taken at my first day of work at Radley Financial. I hadn't even realized anyone had taken it. At the bottom, a small engraved plaque read, "Past and present, both made you who you are." Tears filled my eyes, but they were warm, grateful tears. I set the frame beside the bracelet box on my dresser, my heart swelling with something I hadn't felt in a long time: love, quiet and genuine. Later that night, I poured another glass of wine and stepped out onto the balcony again. The city glowed beneath me, alive and endless. I thought about everything that had happened: the loneliness, the betrayal, the pain, the rebuilding. Every wound had shaped me, every scar had taught me something. I wasn't the same woman who once begged for scraps of affection. I was someone new, someone whole. I whispered into the night. They gave me nothing for my birthday, but I gave myself the life I deserved. The wind carried the words away, soft and certain. When I went back inside, I sat on the edge of my bed, looking around at the life I'd built: a cozy apartment, a job I loved, people who respected me, peace that no one could take. I picked up my pen one last time that night and wrote, "Healing isn't forgetting what they did to you. It's remembering it without it breaking you anymore." No grand celebrations, no gifts from others, just the quiet hum of a new beginning. And that was the greatest gift I could ever give myself.